May 28, 1940. Reich Air Ministry, Berlin. The destruction of the Third Reich didn't begin with a bomb. It began with a laugh, a deep, resonant belly laugh echoing off the marble walls of Hermann Göring's private office. The Reichsmarschall is holding a piece of intelligence paper in his manicured hands, and to him, it reads like the punchline to the world's most absurd joke. The report details a speech by President Franklin Roosevelt, a request to the American Congress for an industrial expansion that would allow the United States to produce 50,000 military aircraft a year. 50,000. Göring wipes a tear of mirth from his eye. He looks at his staff, men who have spent years building the Luftwaffe, men who understand the artisan craft of building a Messerschmitt. He tosses the report onto his mahogany desk with undisguised contempt. He tells them the Americans are desperate. He tells them it is a bluff, a crude piece of democratic propaganda designed to frighten children. Let them try, he sneers. Americans are good at making razor blades. They are good at making refrigerators. But they know nothing of war machines. In his mind, and in the minds of the entire German High Command, war production is an art form. It requires master craftsmen. It requires heritage. You cannot simply turn an automobile factory into an arsenal. You cannot take a shopgirl who sells lipstick and teach her to rivet the wing of a bomber. To believe otherwise is not just optimistic, it is a delusion. And so, Göring laughs. He laughs because he believes he is watching a poker player bet his entire life savings on a pair of twos. Fast forward 3 years, the laughter hasn't stopped. It has just moved location. April 8, 1943, 27,000 feet above Caen, France. The air is thin, cold, and crystal clear. Oberleutnant Ralph Hermischen, a veteran ace of the Luftwaffe, peers down through the canopy of his Focke-Wulf 190. He spots them climbing laboriously from below. New American fighters making their combat debut over occupied Europe. He keys his radio, and the smirk is audible even through the static and the oxygen mask. The Yankees have sent us flying milk bottles, he transmits to his wingman. Below him, 16 Republic P-47 Thunderbolts are straining for altitude. To the German eye, accustomed to the predatory sleekness of the Spitfire or the angular aggression of the Messerschmitt, these American machines look comical. They are obese, barrel-shaped fuselages, wings that look too small to hold them up, a cockpit that sits on top like a greenhouse. The German pilots start calling out names on the radio. The pregnant cow, the flying bathtub, the Indiana truck. They analyze the physics of the situation, and the physics make them confident. This American plane weighs 7 tons. It is twice the weight of a Spitfire. It is a dinosaur, a monolithic brick trying to fly. The German tactical manuals are clear. In a dogfight, agility is king. You turn, you climb, you dance. This American monstrosity cannot dance. It is meat for the slaughter. Hermchen positions his squadron. He feels no fear. Why should he? He is a knight of the air, and he is about to joust with a garbage truck. He doesn't know it yet, but he is looking at an object that doesn't care about his tactical elegance. He is looking at an engine block with wings. But for now, he just sees a target that is too fat to run away. The arrogance isn't limited to the sky. It permeates the ground, deep into the soil of the ideology itself. Nazi racial doctrine has classified the enemy not just as militarily inferior, but biologically incapable. The Untermensch, the subhuman. Intelligence reports filter in about a group of American pilots training in Tuskegee, Alabama, black pilots. The German commanders shake their heads. Their worldview is built on a rigid hierarchy where people of African descent are considered inherently incapable of mastering complex machinery. To them, the idea of a black man flying a high-performance fighter aircraft is as ridiculous as the idea of America building 50,000 planes. It violates the natural order. They believe these red tails will scatter at the first sign of combat. They believe they lack the courage for combat leadership. They view the American experiment of diverse integration not as a strength, but as a fatal weakness, a mongrel army that will collapse against the racial purity of the Aryan warrior. And finally, look at the maps in the headquarters in East Prussia. August 1944. General Alfred Jodl reviews the situation on the Western Front. General Patton's Third Army is racing across France at speeds that defy military science. They are 400 miles from the beaches, 400 miles from their supply depots. Jodl puts down his pencil. He knows the math. He knows that an armored division consumes 150,000 gallons of fuel a day. He knows that historically, inevitably, an army that moves this fast outruns its logistics. It is the tyranny of distance. They will stop, Jodl assures his staff. They must stop. He is projecting German limitations onto American capabilities. He assumes the Americans are using the same logic, the same supply trains, the same horse-drawn wagons that make up 80% of German transport. He assumes that physics applies to the Americans the same way it applies to the Wehrmacht. He doesn't realize that the Americans have decided to ignore physics. From the Reich Ministry to the cockpit of a Focke-Wulf, to the map rooms of the Wolf's Lair, the consensus is absolute. The Americans are loud. They are vulgar. They are racially impure, and they are amateurs. The Germans are laughing at the fat planes. They are laughing at the black pilots. They are laughing at the impossible production goals. They are laughing. And they have no idea that the monster is already at the door. While Reichsmarschall Göring was busy wiping tears of laughter from his eyes in Berlin, a Danish immigrant named William Knudsen was standing on a flat stretch of farmland in Michigan, erasing the concept of impossible. Welcome to Willow Run. If you want to understand why Germany lost, don't look at a battlefield map. Look at this single building. 3.5 million square feet. The largest factory under one roof in the history of the human race. It wasn't just a building. It was a cathedral of violence. Göring had laughed at the idea of 50,000 planes. He called it propaganda. But inside Willow Run, the Ford Motor Company wasn't building propaganda. They were building the B-24 Liberator. And they weren't building them like craftsmen. They were building them like cars. The assembly line stretched for 1 solid mile. At one end, raw aluminum entered. At the other end, a 4-engine bomber rolled out. April 1944. Clock the speed. In Germany, a team of skilled mechanics might spend days hand-fitting a fuselage. At Willow Run, the line moved continuously. 1:24. Bomber every 63 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. While a German pilot slept, America built 20 bombers. While he ate breakfast, America built 10 more. By the time he finished his morning briefing, another dozen were sitting on the tarmac, engines turning. This single factory, just this one, was outproducing the entire German aviation industry. Göring wasn't betting against a poker player. He was betting against an avalanche. And what about that flying milk bottle? That fat fighter plane the Luftwaffe aces were snickering at. Let's peel back the skin of the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. Alexander Kartveli, the designer, didn't make a mistake. He didn't accidentally build a fat plane. He built a monster on purpose. When the army asked for a high-altitude interceptor, Kartveli looked at them and said, "It will be a dinosaur, but it will be a dinosaur with good proportions." The Germans saw obesity. An engineer saw the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine. 2,000 horsepower, 18 cylinders of radial fury. It was an engine so powerful, it was essentially a locomotive with a propeller. Why was it so big? Because it carried a turbo supercharger the size of a man inside the fuselage. While German engines gasped for air at 30,000 feet, the jug was just clearing its throat. And those wings? The ones that looked too small? They were packed with lead. 850 caliber Browning machine guns, not cannons that ran out of ammo in 10 seconds. Machine guns that carried 3,400 rounds of ammunition. The German aces laughed because they judged a fighter by how it danced. The P-47 wasn't built to dance. It was built to dive. It was a 7-ton anvil falling from the stratosphere. It didn't need to turn inside you. It just needed to point at you. But the true horror wasn't the metal. It was the liquid. Deep below the factories, the geologic truth of the war was being pumped to the surface. In 1944, Germany, scavenging every drop of synthetic fuel, struggling to run its industry, manages to scrape together 33 million barrels of oil. The United States, 1.8 billion barrels? That is not a superiority, that is a drowning. The Axis powers combined produced less than 2% of American petroleum, while the German General Staff was calculating how to save liters of fuel for their tanks. American refineries were producing so much high-octane gasoline, they didn't know where to store it. This was the industrial monster that Göring had mocked. A nation that could build a bomber every hour. A nation that turned oil into a weapon cheaper than water. A nation that didn't just mobilize for war, it industrialized death. The Germans thought they were fighting a war of skill. They were about to find out they were fighting a math equation, and the math was coming for them at 400 miles per hour. June 26, 1943, the skies over France. The moment the joke stops being funny. Robert S. Johnson, a young American pilot, is flying his P-47 Thunderbolt at the rear of the formation. He is bounced by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s. These are the elite, the hunters. They see the fat American plane, and they smell blood. A German ace slides in behind Johnson. He has the perfect angle. He pulls the trigger. Boom! 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 21 20mm cannon shells explode against the Thunderbolt. 200 machine gun bullets tear through the fuselage. In a Spitfire, Johnson would be dead. In a Messerschmitt, he would be a fireball. But he is in a bathtub made of American steel. The canopy shatters. Hydraulic fluid sprays his face. Fire erupts behind the instrument panel. But the plane keeps flying. The German pilot runs out of cannon ammo. He is confused. He pulls up alongside Johnson. He stares at the wreck flying next to him. He looks at Johnson. Johnson looks at him. The German shakes his head in pure disbelief. He has just hit this thing with enough ordnance to sink a boat, and it refuses to die. This is the kinetic slap. The realization that you are hitting a wall that hits back. And when the Thunderbolt hits back, it doesn't duel. It erases. When American pilots learned to stop turning and start diving, the flying milk bottle became a meteor. They climbed to 30,000 feet, rolled inverted, and dropped at 550 miles per hour. The Germans called it the Donnerschlag, the thunderclap. They didn't hear an engine. They heard a sonic boom followed by 8 heavy machine guns converging on a single point, 6,000 rounds per minute. A wall of lead. German ace Gabi Gabreski described the result. They don't just go down, they explode. The P-47 didn't shoot planes down. It sawed them in half. Now look at the ground. North Africa. February 1943. A German panzer commander in his Mark IV tank is scanning the horizon. He is confident. His tank has a better gun, better optics. He is a superior warrior. But he is deaf. Inside his tank, the radio is screaming static. His 10-watt amplitude modulation set can barely transmit a few hundred meters. To talk to his platoon, he has to open the hatch and use hand signals or flags. He is fighting alone. Then, out of the dust, 5 American Sherman tanks appear. They don't stop. They don't wave flags. They move like a single organism. 1 moves left. 2 provide covering fire. 1 flanks right. They react instantly to threats the others haven't even seen. The German commander is baffled. How? Is it telepathy? No. It is Motorola. Every single American tank, from the commander to the lowest private, is equipped with an FM crystal-controlled radio. 25 watts of power. Perfect clarity. The Americans aren't fighting tank on tank. They have built a network. While the German is shouting into a static-filled headset, the Americans are coordinating an ambush with the casual intimacy of a telephone call. The German tank isn't destroyed by a better gun. It is destroyed by a better network. The isolated warrior dies because he cannot scream for help. And finally, the ideological collision. July 2nd, 1943, Sicily. A Focke-Wulf pilot sees a P-40 Warhawk. He sees the pilot inside. A black man. According to everything he has been taught in the Hitler Youth, this opponent is Untermensch, subhuman, incapable of complex technical thought, inherently cowardly. The German expects the American to run. Instead, First Lieutenant Charles B. Hall turns inside the German's turn. It is a move that requires precise physics, immense G-force tolerance, and cold aggression. Hall fires a long burst. The Focke-Wulf shudders, stalls, and plummets into the Sicilian ground. The Black Birdmen, the Schwarze Vogelmenschen, have arrived. At Anzio, 12 black pilots fighting in obsolete P-40s shoot down multiple Focke-Wulfs in 2 days. Over Berlin, they shoot down the jets, the Ma-26 that were supposed to be invincible. The laughter in the Luftwaffe mess halls dies out. The racial theories crumble in the face of burning aluminum. The fat planes don't die. The deaf tanks are outmaneuvering them, and the inferior race is blowing them out of the sky. The collision has happened, and the Germans are beginning to realize the enemy isn't just lucky. The enemy is inevitable. December 17th, 1944. The Ardennes forest, Belgium. It is freezing. The kind of cold that snaps metal and turns oil into sludge. SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper, the youngest regimental commander in the Waffen-SS, climbs down from his Tiger tank. His massive 70-ton machine is silent. The 700-horsepower Maybach engine isn't broken. It's starving. The fuel gauge reads empty. Peiper is spearheading the last great German offensive, Operation Watch on the Rhine. His orders are to race to the Meuse River. But his fuel allocation is a joke. Enough for 50 miles of combat, in a campaign that requires reaching Antwerp. The German High Command has built a strategy on theft. They must capture American fuel dumps to survive. Piper walks through the dawn mist toward a captured American supply depot at Honsfeld. He sees it, a pyramid of jerry cans, thousands of them. 50,000 gallons of high-octane gasoline sitting there like a gift from the gods. His men scramble like desperate animals, pouring the precious liquid into their thirsty tanks. But as Piper watches his men scavenge, a chill deeper than the Belgian winter settles in his gut. He realizes something terrifying. The Americans left this here. They abandoned 50,000 gallons because it didn't matter to them. To the Wehrmacht, fuel is liquid gold, measured by the liter, guarded by the Gestapo. To the Americans, it is trash. It gets worse. A few days later, Piper pushes towards Stavelot. He is chasing a massive depot holding over 2 million gallons. This is the prize. This is victory. But as his tanks approach, a wall of fire erupts into the sky. A pillar of black smoke rises 1,000 feet. American engineers haven't run away. They have casually pulled the pins on white phosphorus grenades and burned the entire stockpile. 2 million gallons. Piper stands on his turret, watching the inferno. He turns to his aide. The arrogance is gone. They can afford to burn 2 million gallons to deny them to us. He whispers, "What are we doing here?" He realizes they aren't fighting an army. They are fighting an ocean. The Americans burn more fuel to heat their coffee than the entire Panzer Division has to move its tanks. Now, leave the freezing forest. Travel 4,000 miles west. Summer, 1943. A train is cutting through the darkness of the Texas plains. Inside, pressed against the glass, are men from Rommel's Africa Corps. They are prisoners of war. They have been told by Goebbels that America is a collapsing, degenerate nation, crippled by strikes and Jewish conspiracies. It is 10:01 p.m. In Germany, the blackout has reigned since 1940. Darkness is a patriotic duty. But outside the train window, the horizon is glowing, electric lights everywhere. Farmhouses blazing with illumination, street lamps in tiny towns burning wastefully, neon signs in shop windows. Lieutenant Werner Burkhardt writes in his diary with a trembling hand, "The Americans must be lying to us." He cannot process it. How can a nation fighting a two-front war afford to light up the empty prairie at midnight? The train stops at a station in Virginia. The prisoners watch a railway worker. He is eating his lunch. He takes a bite of an apple, decides he doesn't want it, and throws the half-eaten fruit into the dirt. The German officers stare at the rotting apple. In North Africa, they fought over biscuit crumbs. In Stalingrad, men are boiling leather belts for soup. And here, a common laborer throws away fresh fruit because he is simply not hungry. This is the psychological nuclear bomb. It isn't the B-17 bomber that breaks them. It is the waste. They arrive at the camps, Camp Hearn, Texas, Camp Crossville, Tennessee. They expect dungeons. They find wooden barracks with central heating. They find showers with hot water. And they find the canteen. A German soldier, dusty from the Desert War, walks into the camp store. He sees a bottle of brown, fizzing liquid. Coca-Cola. He asks the price. 5 cents, the guard says. The same price for a general. The same price for a private. The same price for a prisoner. He drinks it. It is sweet, carbonated, and completely unnecessary. It is a product that exists solely for pleasure. And there are millions of bottles of it. He realizes that while Germany is melting down church bells to make bullets, America is mass-producing sugar water in glass bottles and shipping it across the Atlantic. Then comes the ice cream. July 4th, 1943. The USS General M.B. Stewart is crossing the Atlantic. The German prisoners are below decks. The American crew serves them ice cream, frozen milk and sugar, in the middle of a war zone, in the middle of the ocean. A German officer later writes, "We expected to be starved. Instead, the Americans fed us better than our own army had. They watch American mothers in Texas baking cakes and bringing them to the prison gates for Christmas. They hear choirs singing Stille Nacht to the very men who killed their sons." This is the soft power that Göring never calculated. The terror of abundance. The realization that you are fighting a nation so wealthy, so secure, and so terrifyingly productive that it can afford to be kind to its enemies. The German soldier looks at his bowl of ice cream. He looks at the electric lights burning in the day. He looks at the guards throwing away half-smoked cigarettes. And he knows. Germany hasn't just lost the war. Germany never even sat at the same table. August 1944, the map room of Field Marshal Günther von Kluge. The German High Command is calm. They are looking at the maps of France, and they see General Patton's Third Army racing east. They are moving so fast, 60 miles a day, that they have torn the front wide open. But the German generals are smiling. Why? Because they have a calculator. They know the immutable laws of logistics. They know that a tank is just a heavy metal box without gasoline. They calculate the distance from the Normandy beaches to the front line. 400 miles. They calculate the consumption rates. They look at the destroyed railways. It is impossible, General Jodl declares in East Prussia. Patton will run dry in 48 hours. Physics cannot be violated. They are waiting for the American army to starve. They are preparing the counterattack against a stranded, fuel-less enemy. But while the generals are doing math in a castle, a sergeant named John Houston is hallucinating behind the wheel of a GMC Deuce and a half truck. He hasn't slept in 36 hours. He is driving on a highway that doesn't exist on any civilian map. The Red Ball Express. The Americans have done something that violates every rule of German military doctrine. They have taken two parallel highways and turned them into a one-way conveyor belt of steel. Northbound, full trucks. Southbound, empty trucks. Speed limit, 35 miles per hour. Headlights, blazing, all night, in a war zone. 6,000 trucks are rolling bumper to bumper. 75% of the drivers are African-American soldiers, men deemed inferior by Nazi ideology and second-class citizens by their own country. But right now, they are the lifeblood of the war. They are high on adrenaline and benzodrine, driving trucks until the engines catch fire, then pushing the burning wrecks into the ditch and jumping into the next one. The Germans calculated that the Americans could deliver 3,000 tons of supplies a day. The Red Ball Express is delivering 12,500 tons every single day. Patton doesn't stop. He doesn't even slow down. The German trap snaps shut on empty air, and the Third Army smashes into the flank of the Wehrmacht with full fuel tanks and ammunition racks overflowing. September 1944, the Battle of Aricourt. This is where the unstoppable force meets the immovable object, the German Panzer Brigade's counterattack. They have the Panther tank. It is a masterpiece of engineering, thick sloped armor. A high-velocity 75mm gun that can kill a Sherman from a mile away. On paper, the Americans are dead. The Sherman is lighter, weaker, and undergunned. But the German tanks have a fatal flaw. They are deaf. Inside the Panther, the commander is screaming into a radio set that uses amplitude modulation. It's technology from the 1930s. The engine noise, the track squeal, the static, it all drowns him out. To talk to the tank next to him, he has to open his hatch and wave a flag. He is isolated. He is fighting a private war inside a steel coffin. Inside the American Sherman, it is a different universe. The commander is wearing a headset connected to an SCR 508 radio. Frequency modulation. FM, crystal controlled. Perfect clarity. He doesn't just talk to his platoon, he talks to the artillery, he talks to the tank destroyers, he talks to the Piper Cub spotting plane circling overhead. The German Panthers advance through the fog, hunting for targets. They are blind giants. The American Shermans don't duel them, they swarm them. Target left. 3 Panthers. Range 800. Fire. The command crackles instantly across the entire American network. A platoon of Shermans, separated by ridges, coordinates a simultaneous ambush. They shoot the Panthers in the side. They shoot them in the rear. They call in 150 meters artillery strikes on the German assembly areas before the Germans even know they are spotted. The result is a massacre. The 4th Armored Division destroys 281 German armored vehicles. They lose only 41 Shermans. A kill ratio of 7-1. German intelligence writes it off as training. They refuse to believe that their superior machines were beaten by inferior radios. But the truth is simpler and colder. The German tank was a gladiator. The American tank was a node in a digital hive mind. The Red Ball Express brought the ammo. The FM radio guided the aim, and the arrogant belief in superior German engineering turned into a burning wreck on a French hillside. Listen closely. The roar of the engines has faded. Now, you hear the scratching of pencils on paper, the whispering of men who know they are already dead. This is the sound of the German soul breaking. June 4, 1943. A train slicing through the Texas night. Inside, Unteroffizier Werner Burkhardt is pressing his face against the cold glass. He is a soldier of the Reich, trained to believe in the weakness of the West. But outside, he sees an endless constellation of electric lights. Every farmhouse, every street corner, burning. At midnight. He opens his diary and writes a sentence that would get him executed in Berlin. The Americans must be lying to us. No nation could possess such abundance while fighting a war on 2 fronts. He isn't looking at a weapon. He is looking at a light bulb, and it terrifies him more than a tank. Shift to the Ardennes. December 1944. SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper, the fierce commander of the German spearhead, stands before a captured American fuel depot. 50,000 gallons, a fortune. But then he learns the truth. The Americans burned 2 million gallons at Stavelot just to keep it from him. He turns to his men. The fire in his eyes is gone. They can afford to burn 2 million gallons. What are we doing here? He later confesses, "We have discovered we are fighting an enemy who burns more fuel to deny it to us than we received for this entire operation. We cannot win." It is the realization of the impossible. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, whispers it to his staff before D-Day. He knows the math. The Americans can lose 10 tanks for every one we destroy and still overwhelm us. Obergefreiter Hans Müller, watching American railway workers in Virginia throw away half-eaten food, writes to his mother, "The waste was magnificent. It was the carelessness of infinite resource." And in Berlin, the propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels finally writes the truth in his private diary. "We fight the world's greatest industrial power with rhetoric." They knew. Before the bombs fell, before the tanks rolled, they knew they were fighting infinity. Now, stop listening to the whispers. Look at the data. This is not a battle. This is an industrial execution. Oil, the blood of war, 1944. Germany, scavenging the bottom of the barrel, produces 33 million barrels of oil. The United States, 1.8 billion. The ratio is 50 to 1. The Axis powers combined produced less than 2% of American petroleum. Aircraft, 1944, one single year. The United States builds 96,270 military aircraft. That single year's production exceeded Germany's entire wartime output of 94,000 planes. While Germany was building jets in caves with slave labor, America was building an air force larger than the entire Luftwaffe every single year. Firepower. During the Siege of Metz, American artillery fired 100,000 rounds in 24 hours. The German defenders? They were rationed to 50 rounds per gun per day. The Americans fired more ammo in a day than the Germans could transport in a month. Logistics. The Battle of the Bulge. Hitler scraped together 5 million gallons of fuel for his entire last gamble. On the other side of the line, the Allied armies were consuming 7.5 million gallons every single day. The Americans burned more gas just driving to the battlefield than the Germans had to fight the battle. Communications. Every single American Sherman tank, 49,224 of them, had a crystal-controlled FM radio. German tanks, only 20% had full transmitters. The Americans were a network. The Germans were a collection of deaf, blind islands. Ships, the Liberty ship SS Robert E. Peary. German U-boats took months to build. This American ship was built in 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes. We launched ships faster than they could make torpedoes to sink them. The numbers are cold. They are unfeeling. And they tell the only story that matters. Courage didn't lose the war. Tactics didn't lose the war. Germany was buried under an avalanche of steel, oil, and aluminum. They didn't lose a fight. They were deleted by a spreadsheet. May 8, 1945. The guns finally go cold, but for the men of the Wehrmacht, the true surrender didn't happen on a piece of paper in Reims. It happened in their minds, months earlier, while holding a bottle of Coca-Cola or watching a Liberty ship unload enough wheat to feed a city. The psychological break was total. Consider the German prisoners returning home from American camps. They didn't come back as hardened Nazis plotting revenge. They came back as missionaries of a new religion. Production. They walked into the ruins of Berlin and Hamburg, cities pulverized by the very bombers Göring said would never fly. And they didn't see defeat. They saw a roadmap. They had seen the future in Texas and Michigan. They knew that world power wasn't about marching boots or racial purity. It was about supply chains. It was about the efficient management of resources. It was about a farmer in Nebraska having a refrigerator. Hauptmann Walter Schmidt wrote the obituary for the Nazi soul. We believed we were bringing civilization. We found that we were the barbarians. The Americans we called weak and decadent showed us what civilization actually meant. They realized they had been lied to, not just about the Jews or the Bolsheviks, but about the fundamental nature of power. They had been told that will overcame matter. The American assembly line proved that matter, when organized by free men, crushes the will of tyrants every time. And so, the legacy. Look at modern Germany. Look at the Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle of the 1950s. Where did it come from? It came in part from the 370,000 men who returned from America with a secret. They knew that prosperity didn't come from conquest. It came from production. Men like Hans Kroll, a prisoner at Camp Shelby, became the West German ambassador to the United States. Men like Walter Hallstein, who taught classes in a prison camp, became the first president of the European Commission. They built a new Germany based on the lessons of the Red Ball Express and the Willow Run factory. They replaced the goose step with the container ship. They replaced the Panzer with the Mercedes. They stopped trying to steal the world's resources and started trying to out-manufacture the world. And they succeeded. Hermann Göring died in his cell at Nuremberg, swallowing poison to escape the hangman. In his final days, he was still obsessed with the numbers, calculating ratios, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the damned factory that broke his back. He died a relic, a man who thought war was an art, killed by a civilization that treated war as a business. The Americans didn't just defeat Germany, they re-engineered it. They proved that the greatest victory isn't destroying your enemy, it is turning your enemy into a witness. The laugh in 1940 was the sound of arrogance. The silence in 1945 was the sound of learning. The smoke clears, and the silence returns. Thank you for walking through this heavy chapter of history with me today. It's not easy to look directly at the past, unfiltered and raw, but doing so is the best way to honor those who lived it. If you value these deep dives and want to keep exploring the truth together, please leave a like and subscribe. It truly helps keep these archives open. I'd love to read your thoughts on this topic in the comments below. Until the next story, take care.